Hi everyone, I'm Frank, your international officer at Leeds University Union, and today we have it's Gina, and can you tell me what's your name? Or you want to use the other
I don't mind using my name. I'm Scarlett.
Scarlett and
Scarlett, yeah.
Scarlett
Riley.
Ryan, right? Ryan,
Riley.
Scarlett and Riley.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Franks, your international officer at Leeds University Union. Today we having Scarlett and Riley to be interviewed about their passion to join this protest as the student organizer. So yeah, hello. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell our audience the background information about this protest?
No, can we go first?
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm Scarlett. I'm at Leeds Beckett Uni, and I started the group chat for the organising of the first protest. And we'd been talking a lot about the bill that is going to be passed, which is what the protest is about. And I was surprised that there hadn't been anything organised to protest against it in the first place. So I just kind of asked the question on Facebook, and then quite a few people messaging us about it. I started the group chat, and then from there everybody just a lot of people joined, and then we made the first protest, which was fairly successful, and now we've got a second one going on from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wonderful. Riley, you want to
add? I'm Riley. I also study at Leeds Beckett. I was obviously with her when she created the group chat, and I was very much motivated just based on my personal experience with the police and how they can utilize power against poorer people and marginalized communities and everything like that. I just felt extremely motivated to join it, especially after what you'd seen after the Sarah Everard vigil, the violence committed there by the police, and then obviously recently with Bristol, everything like that. I just felt the need to actually join it and create some sort of movement where we could try and push back against this behemoth of power that the Conservatives are trying to push through to oppress us, basically.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. And yeah, how's your feeling like as a student to, you say you didn't see any other people organize that and you tried to organize it. Is it really hard to do that, or like you feel like it's quite exciting? So is it your first time to organize a protest like that?
Yeah, well, I'd been to the Sarah Everard protest a couple of days before, and to be honest, I thought it would be much harder. I didn't think. I made the group chat, but even then I was thinking, oh, it's not going to happen. It probably won't happen. Nobody cares that much. But then it did, and it actually did happen, which was quite exciting. Even though I wouldn't really say I'm like a main organizer, it felt good that I'd started something that has actually become a bit of a movement.
Mm.
It really wasn't that difficult though. It seemed like the atmosphere was there, and people wanted protest against it, and people just joined.
Yeah, I think students just need a little bit of a push. That's all. Just a little bit of a nudge, and then everyone's ready on board. More students are on board with this sort of thing. More students are ready to protest against oppressive bills that might harm them, not just them, but every community in Britain as well. And it's just a little push, and creating that Facebook post was a little push everyone needed, and then from there, more and more people got engaged, and that's all you need just to get more engagement.
Yeah, I think not just as a student, but just as a resident in the UK in general. This is something that affects everybody. It affects marginalized communities, any regular person. This is, even if you're somebody who's not politically active, this still affects you. This is about your right to do it if you wanted to, not just if you already do. If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. I really agree with that. So you can see like earlier this year, we have this protest happening on, and just bringing back to our earlier last year, 2020, we have Black Lives Matter, the huge protests around the world. So do you feel like they have the link with each other? Especially you can see the police was really violent for some of the Black people protesting last year. Do you find the interlink with each other, or it just push you like you feel like it's more encouraging our people to join the protest against this bill?
Well, I think both. I mean, most of the movements that are going on currently all have a very anti-police power sentiment about them. So Black Lives Matter, obviously, a large part of that was about the brutality and over-policing used against Black people. The Sarah Everard vigils were about, the police response to them.
Reclaim
the fact
the Night.
that, Reclaim the Night, the fact that a police officer is the one who murdered Sarah Everard, despite the fact that he had also flashed somebody very recently. And I mean, the Block the Bill protest, which gives police more power despite the circumstances, despite the other conversations going on around the police already having too much power. And I mean, the power they already do have, they don't really use effectively. There's so many issues that they won't tackle because they're just too much work. Something like rape, sexual assault, burglary,
Domestic
abuse. Just they don't seem to really care. It's too much work. They don't really want to do anything about it. Whereas last night we watched outside, there was people gathered in the park, and I think about 50 police officers turned up and were searching around the park with torches. And it just annoyed us because while I understand that's the job, they don't put this effort into things that matter more than something like that, like a gathering.
To use my own personal experience, to get a little personal, when I was younger, people brought into my house and attacked my mum and family and everything. So we reported that to the police. Only two officers showed up. And I was watching the other night, 50 officers there, and two showed up for a serious crime like that. I just think it's inconsistent, it's careless. You know, almost if you're working class, it's like you deserve it, sort of, is the attitude by the police force. And then this bill is their perfect excuse to stamp down, as well as the Conservative government, to stamp down anybody that can have a genuine movement against this, by the restrictions of using protest outside Parliament, you know, things like that. It's all just one big power move from them under the gaze of the pandemic, because people are quite distracted by it, you know, sometimes rightfully so, to try and stamp out any political movement against them permanently, pretty much.
Yeah, well, the bill combines, it's like the kind of perfect mix of thing it's combined, because they've increased police power while also cracking down on protesters. So while increasing the power of the police, they've made it so that it's much more difficult to organise protests without legal backlash from it, which means that they can more safely pass a bill without any scrutiny from the British public, which is what you should have against anything that the government produce. There should be the right to protest about something. If we're not able to protest, if we're not able to exercise democratic rights and speak out against something that we don't believe in, agree with, then why should they be allowed to pass bills at the same time?
Yeah, that's very true. And just in case some of our audience they don't really understand this part of history, do you think it's a long time issue, like kind of the police violence? It happened for a long time, like for a few more years earlier, or it's just like really latest things? It just happened like after 2018, 2019 things.
Well, historically, you can use Leeds as an example of police violence. I think his name is Olawale. I think he has a memorial online. He, in the 60s, for example, he was hounded by a couple of racist police officers who didn't leave him alone. Eventually, they chased him. He drowned to death because of that, because of the amount of torment he got from them. And it constantly occurs, especially around here, where there's a black community presence. The police basically, you know, they treat them as an enemy. They're an enemy to them, and you'll see more police officers come out if it's in a black community. You'll see more violence, more aggression, more vigilance from them, which leads to obviously a bit of a disconnect between them, and the police basically are hated by them, because, and justifiably. This violence has always existed. Even in Sunderland, you see violence committed by the police near constantly. It's a very poor area, and yeah, some people commit crimes, but it doesn't matter really. It doesn't justify the amount of violence. To use an example, in 2011, if you remember, Mark Duggan, you know, gunned down by the police. If you remember Ian Tomlinson, it was a G20 protest in London, pushed over, cracked head open, everything like that. This has existed for longer than just the past couple of years. It just now seems like people are actually starting to realise what the police are as an institution and what they are based on, which is to be basically an arm of the state, an arm of capitalism, to push people down, to bring people down, keep them obedient.
Yeah, it seems like the pandemic just during this year, not just a pandemic, lots of things happen at the same time, like, and people just have more time to rethink our institution, the violence we have in our daily life. So I just have a look for your social media, the organization's social media. You have the Instagram page and Twitter page. So how do you want our students to get involved, especially like some of our international students, maybe they just first arrived a few years, they didn't know how they can contribute. So in what way you want more students to join, or like local residents to join to help for this protest?
I think anytime there's a protest on, we've got the event up, you just say interested, at least. Just try to get the numbers up on that. It gets more people attracted to it. For social media, for example, if somebody makes a post about a comment on it, so it'll boost the post up in popularity, so more people will see it. Even if you don't think you're going yourself, just comment on it. Try to get out. It's the protest coming up tomorrow. It's 1 o'clock. I think people can get there on time. If you have a bad sleep schedule, you wake up late, just try and wake up early, get there as fast as possible, be there, be present. And for the international student community, of course, some people might think it doesn't affect them because they're temporarily living here, but it does. It still does, even more so than a lot of people living in Britain, because of how much, sort of hatred they can get, racially speaking.
Especially, I think, especially during the pandemic, there's been a massive increase in sort of hatred against Asian communities, Asian people.
Yeah.
The kind of link that people see between an Asian person and the coronavirus, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I mean, even that, the police, looking at it from the perspective of like an Asian international student, the police care more about stopping a house party, stopping something that doesn't matter as much than something like an assault against an Asian person. It just it doesn't matter in their terms. It's too much paperwork. It's just too much work for them, too much investigating, and nothing ever comes of it.
And let's not forget, a lot of the police force today, it came out that Metropolitan Police Officers was part of a neo-Nazi terrorist organization called National Action. That came out today, which that's one to be exposed. But there's a lot more of them. Of the 20,000 officers we have, there's a lot more of them hidden within there, in these organizations, ready to commit violence for the sake of their organization, and they're in a position of immense power. If people see a police officer, they instantly decide to respect them, but you shouldn't. They don't deserve that power. They haven't earned it. They haven't earned that respect in any way, and they'll use it against you if all you do is show them obedience. So,
yeah,
for the international community, they just need to. I think maybe make the organisations more open to them as well, obviously, in how we actually operate.
I think it would be nice if we could have somebody who could make it more accessible to international students as well. Obviously, there's not many people that run the social media accounts, and it would be nice to find somebody who could make that more accessible.
Yeah, that's really like interesting point. Especially, I think probably because of like COVID situation, lots of international students, they haven't get a chance to go back to UK to study. Maybe like I think that's something we can working on. I can try to ask the university to do more in the future. And also like I know when you try to organize this protest, do you think you have face any pressure from the police, or like any pressure from the public when during your first protest, like maybe the first one?
Well, the police were present at the first one, but they did keep the distance. There wasn't really anything from them there.
Yeah, there wasn't really any reason for them to intervene.
Yeah, they didn't have any reason.
Completely peaceful, no violence whatsoever committed. Our language was a bit aggressive, I suppose, but that's understandable at a protest. The police did back off because they had nothing to complain about. Everyone was socially distancing at these protests. Everyone wears masks. Everyone has the hand sanitizer on. We're not spreading COVID at all. We're taking it very seriously, while also taking this other issue extremely seriously as well.
But from the public, definitely there was some backlash.
Especially on social media.
Yeah, on social media in particular. So I found quite a few articles about the protest, like pictures. And even just going through the comment sections, it was a bit upsetting, because some of the comments were there was a lot of comments saying we should have been water gunned down. That we're going to spread, we're discussed, and
eradicate
eradicated is one of the words I saw actually. Eradicate the students doing this, water gun them. That we're spreading COVID, even though you can see in the pictures and you can see in social media posts, everything, we brought extra masks, we brought extra hand sanitizer, and people were actually asking people to stand apart.
Mhm.
So it was paid attention to. It was as safe as we could possibly make it, but still it just seemed like it wasn't enough for some people.
Mhm.
And I do feel that you see this more about protests than you would about something like when people came out to celebrate football or something, a team winning.
Mhm.
You don't really see those types of comments there. Whereas
Mm.
if it's a protest, people get really angry for some reason, and
Mhm.
I don't really see the point in it. But there's not much you can do about it, but make it as safe as you
Well,
can.
the public who say that, I feel very sorry for them because they're misled through the media lies that have came through over these protests. Yorkshire Evening Post has very biased reporting of anything that's been done so far regarding Kill the Bill. BBC News have even felt fault of it as well, a supposed impartial organisation. So it drums up this hatred of people that were just, and Common One says that we're thugs, even though no violence been committed at all. And usually the violence committed is by the police. And in retaliation, maybe people are violent back, but it's in retaliation usually. There's nothing violent about these protests. We're completely peaceful. Our aim is to peacefully force the government to back away from this bill permanently. That's all.
Yeah, yes. I think it's really interesting to see like people in the social media just kind of taking big because people can't really see the face or the identity, so they tend to just say whatever they want without
Yeah.
taking any
Yeah.
responsibility. So in terms of the just now you mentioned for the trust for the police and between the police and the local community. So what do you think the police they should do to earn the trust back from the public? What's the kind of first or easy things they can start for?
I think that would be a very hard thing to do, because this has been, I mean, hundreds of years. There's been
Yeah,
a bad image of the police, because the police were born to oppress the people in the name of the upper class,
the elite.
and they've always kind of worked in the same way. The police are supposed to be beholden to the people, whereas it seems that it's more the other way around, and it shouldn't be.
Obviously, there are some ways to help the police violence problem. One of the main examples is try to train them longer. Our police officers, it's not on the level of the US, but our police officers are not trained enough. They aren't trained enough. They're too willing to use weapons. They're too quick to use them. They're too aggressive. They need to be vetted better. Obviously, you cannot have people slipping in the police force that are part of terrorist organizations, far-right terror organizations like National Action. You can't have that. They need to be vetted properly. They need to have psychological checks constantly, whether they're fit for the job still. Another way is also create a community police, not just community police officers, but for things like domestic abuse and things like that. Instead of bringing out police officers who aren't trained with that, bring out police officers who are psychologically trained to deal with situations like this, and maybe trust could be built. Trust can be built if if the organisation of the police reformed. Just it would have to reform to a very, very large degree, but reform that you haven't seen for a very long time could recover this relationship people have with them if they were just more. The police essentially should just be more caring, not as quick to use violence.
Yeah, I do believe that the police, while they have too much power, but I believe that they are overworked. The things that they're expected to deal with, it's too much to put on one institution, and it's too much power to give them. It's too much responsibility. The things like, I mean, the police are called out for like suicide attempts. The police shouldn't be called out if somebody's going to kill themselves, because they're a threatening presence to have around somebody who's in such a fragile mental state. And they're too willing to be aggressive. And this is an experience I had when I was younger. So when I was about 7 years old, and my mum was in an abusive relationship with my dad. And one night the police were called out because of it. And when the police got there, I was only 7. I came in my sitting room to see 2 police officers standing there, which is quite scary being a child. And what should have happened there is that somebody take me somewhere separate, try and keep us calm, reassure us that everything's going to be all right. But instead, the glared, both these police officers, they basically just glared at us and said, "You need to get out. You need to go back upstairs." Rather than actually trying to reassure us, being so young. My mum was crying. My dad looked very angry at the time, and I just remember being very scared about it. And I mean, I had to leave the room. And in these situations, they have to interview both people. But what they're supposed to do, they're supposed to interview both people separately. so that one can't be intimidated by the other. But that's not what they did. So they interviewed my mum in our sitting room, and my dad was standing in the doorway when they were talking to us, so she couldn't physically say anything about what was actually going on because of how scared she was. And that was just a horrible way that was dealt with. And then because of that shit, she left. And for years, we're being stalked, harassed, and just nothing got done. He broke into our house, broke into the car. I was kidnapped at one point, and just it never really seemed to be something they cared about. It seemed like it was just too much work. Put a restraining order in, and even then he breached it multiple times, and they still never came out because it was just too much work for them.
Well, policing culture needs to change. In something, for example, they'll ride past somebody and it'll just be a glare of anger, disgust. They're almost disgusted at you for being working class, for being poorer, or for being from a different race. That they have this level of disgust. Their attitude in a general needs to change. Culturally, the police are backwards and need to be altered from the top down and the bottom up, both ways. There's a lot of spoiled apples there, and it's spoiling everything in what they do. And the hatred of them is growing, and justifiably growing. It's not misplaced dislike of the police. It's completely correct. And if they continue doing this way, people aren't going to stand for it much longer. They aren't. They've stood under this boot for too long, is the reality. And relating to protests, if they just took more of a hands-off approach with protests, they wouldn't turn violent. The reason the Bristol riots turned violent is because the police started smacking people with batons and riot shields. And no surprise there. If they took a hands-off approach and just allowed people to protest, that would be fine. But obviously they can't because it affects the institution. Another way to make people feel safe, especially like the Black community, is to stop and search. It's an evil practice. It is specifically made against people of certain appearances and certain class backgrounds, and that is all. And to scrap that would create a building of trust. Because I think in London it's an absurd stop and search rate for some groups.
In some parts of London, you're more and Leeds, you're around 29 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you're Black. Mm-hmm. Which I read that a while ago when I was doing something for my course, and it's just insane how high that number is. Mm-hmm. It's just disgusting. It needs to be changed.
Yeah, the main thing is just building a trust, because they've lost it entirely over the years, and all they need to do is just build that trust slowly back up, and the public will accept that as long as they change their ways. And things like this, us protesting about this wouldn't be needed as much if we could just build that trust back up with the police.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm really sorry to hear your personal experience. It's like your bad memory, and I'm definitely happy if you don't want it to be shown to as part of the video. So
oh no, that's fine. No, that's fine.
We're okay.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm fine with that.
My next question is the kind of final one. So what did you hope you want to achieve through this protest? So just now we have mentioned we want a peaceful protest, and is it want them to take the bill back? And is there any something you want to add on from that?
Well, being realistic, I know that one protest isn't going to stop the government from passing this bill. But what I hope to see is that this one protest just causes some sort of chain reaction, starts more protests, more people start being aware of what it is and being aware of how bad it is towards democracy. That more people kind of stand up against it, more people voice what they think over it. I know that one protest isn't going to do it, but hopefully just it raises awareness. Hopefully it just raises awareness and has more people know what's happening and try to make it stop.
The ideal outcome is that the bill is scrapped. That's the ideal outcome, and hopefully it is. There's some parts of the bill, and this is where the Conservatives come in really manipulative. There's some parts of the bill, like higher sentencing for, I think, child abusers is in it, which most people would generally agree with. But they have also embedded the protest thing in that. So the way media's report on it is that we're essentially against all parts of the bill. I'm not against all parts of the bill. And I don't think anybody in our organisation would say that. We are in favour of a lot of parts of the bill that involve higher sentencing for pretty terrible criminals. But they've manipulated it as though if you're protesting against it now, the media can spin as though you're against the good parts of the bill, which is really evil.
Yeah,
which is really manipulative.
Which is absolutely not true. The parts we're quite clear about the parts of the bill we're against. But I've seen this reported quite a few times that we're protesting against like higher sentencing for rapists and things like that. That is not the case. The part we're protesting against is the one that will control protests more. The parts that will give police increased powers where they shouldn't have them. Not those parts of them. Just to make that clear.
And obviously we want the protesting parts together if the bill passed without that. But add on top of it, a community which deserves more spotlight in this is the traveller community, which is going to be severely negatively affected by the bill. And we prefer the bill in which I think they can remove people from a traveller site for 12 months.
Yeah,
I think it is.
I think 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months. Yeah, which is you're taking away somebody's home. You've took away their home, their livelihood. That should be taken out. Of course, that needs to be taken out because it's going to severely impact traveller communities that essentially don't have a house to live in. They live on sites quite often, so it's going to create a massive homeless problem for a lot of communities, for a lot of traveller communities. That would be ideal. I'm not sure if we could really add anything to it. That could be legislation.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the information. I think it's pretty great. And before we end the recording, there's just one more thing. So like I know the students like you both are really keen to get involved in the protestings, but we can still see some of the students group, not just international students, but maybe some of the home students group as well. They feel like they are they not really interested, or they don't feel like this can lead to any change. So like if you are facing this situation, you have a friend, you want to encourage them to join. So what kind of things you want to tell them? And how do you know about this all the information? Is it mainly through the news website, or like something to just help you to understand what is happening around the society, and just something you just feel really important? You have to do something to, to push the change. So
well, to get students involved, we can use a personal example. We had a friend yesterday who wasn't sure about coming to the protest, didn't really know much about it, and we basically showed him some of the clips from recent protests and how the police had treated those protesters. And we also showed him the bill itself. We just explained what was in the bill, and instantly he changed his mind. He knew immediately. I think what really needs to be done, the people who aren't interested probably don't know what's in the bill. That's the thing. Just educate people on the contents of the bill is the key part. If you can educate them fully, this is what the bill is going to do. It's going to restrict protests. It's going to restrict our basic human rights. It might introduce facial recognition software, which is quite a scary concept. If you can just tell people that, I'm sure there'll be enough motivation from them to go, yeah, that is bullshit, basically. Yeah, we should.
Yeah, I think there's some people as well who aren't very political, kind of think that it's a bit too much work to find out what it is. It seems too complicated. It's not. It's really not that complicated. It might sound it when talking about it, but actually just reading about it, it's really not. So I don't want people to be put off by that idea. Even if you've never protested, never been involved politically in your life before, this is a good thing to start getting political about now, because it is fairly easy to understand the bill. It's just, I mean, some of it's worded a bit stupidly, so that's harder. But I mean, the basics are just increased police power against protesters specifically. It affects traveller communities quite heavily. Just in general, I mean, I can't think of them all off the top of my head now, but it is easy to find.
Yeah. Simplify the information, simplify the flow of information, and people are receptive to it immediately. More students, at least, would.
Okay, no problem. Yes, thanks a lot for your time to answer this question. I really like your answer. It's really like just even before I just didn't know totally like what is going on, but now I just have a more clear idea. And I'm really looking forward to finish this video to send it to the public group as well. And let me just stop recording now.